Public defense of my dissertation.
equivalent of the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Theology, STD. The dissertation is entitled Christ, the Image of Social Transformation Towards a Transformative Christology in the African Context. The session for the defense is hereby opened. It is with pleasure that I now give the floor to Atansi.
Thank you, Professor Lee Itabane, for opening this session and for your kind introduction. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Good evening, and thank you for being here physically or virtually for this defense of my PhD dissertation titled Christ, the Image of Social Transformation Towards a Transformative Christology in the African Context. For the purpose of my presentation, I will proceed in 5 steps. 1. I will offer an overview of my dissertation. 2. I will restate the research questions. 3. I will speak of how I tried to deal with the questions in the 4 chapters of my dissertation. 4. I will present the findings and conclusions in 5 theses. 5. I will end with highlighting the contributions of my research. An overview. Christ is a living reality, as well as the formal object of theology in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Africa is a big and complex continent, no doubt, so there is a qualitative and quantitative sense in which I speak of Africa in my dissertation. With respect to the latter, that is, the quantitative, or if you like, the geographical sense, I focus on 4 English-speaking African countries. They are Nigeria, my motherland, Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya. In these countries, Christians and theologians alike continue to wrestle with the social relevance of faith in Jesus Christ. That is, how to bring into reality the experience and proclamation of Christ in certain images like healer, liberator, and king. Expressed another way, ordinary believers and academic theologians are concerned with connecting belief in Jesus Christ to the longing for positive change in the society in which they live and work. In my dissertation, I explore the theological and practical lines of this connection between faith in Jesus Christ and the transformation of human societies in Africa. I reflect on a transformative view of Jesus Christ as the image of God's ongoing healing, liberating, and loving presence and action. My exploration of the relation between belief in Christ and social transformation in this context is carried out in the light of 3 Christological themes, whose key words are relationship, agency, and practice. And the 3 themes are: 1. The enhanced relationship of Christians with Christ and other human beings, as correlating with Jesus' relationship with the Father and other people. 2. The empowered agency of Christians as an outflow of this relationship, and this correlates with the awakening of Jesus' own human agency in his embodiment of and directedness to the kingdom of God. And 3. The representative practices of solidarity within and beyond ecclesial communities as the form of Christian discipleship, and these correlates with Jesus' call to discipleship and the hope for a transformed human condition on the basis of his resurrection. These 3 themes are united and grounded in the most fundamental reality, which is the reality of the incarnation, the event of the eternal word Christ is the image of social transformation. That is, how Christ transforms society, as well as how images of Him can provide resources for transformative Christian social engagement. And this line of thinking is what I did a note in the 4 chapters of my dissertation. The research questions. The following research questions were posed. How does the figure of Jesus Christ affect the way Christians work to build a more just and humane society in Africa? More specifically, how does the imagination of Christ as healer, liberator, and king in the grassroots Christian communities and the theological reflections on these Christological images shape the Christian vocation and responsibility in a way that could bring about much needed societal change in Africa? I tried to spell out this question in the 4 chapters of my dissertation. These questions are no less theological as they are practical. I have grappled with them myself during the 11 years of my apostolic engagement within grassroots Christian communities in Nigeria from 2003 to 2014 before I come into London. Also, the questions are informed by the fact that one of the urgent tasks of African theologians is to reflect critically but constructively about vibrant Christological imagination of African Christian consciousness, particularly from within the grassroots level. And they are to do so not only to create a new African Christology or Christologies, but to inspire a new form of Christian discipleship as ecclesial social solidarity, which will contribute to the transformation of African society. Dealing with the questions in the 4 chapters of my dissertation. Chapter 1 examines the images of Christ as healer, liberator, and king, which are popular in various grassroots Christian communities of Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda, as I already mentioned. This chapter discusses the narratives of meaning and functions of these images in the day-to-day real lives and faith experiences of many Christians. It is argued that in spite of the limitations in the understanding and actual operation of the images, they bear a prophetic potential for social transformation if they are more critically appropriated. Chapter 2 presents and evaluates the works of various African theologians, 6 of them within the 3 trends of contemporary African Christology: inculturation, liberation, and reconstruction. These are the 3 trends of contemporary African Christology. And the theologians whose works are engaged with are Iwo Shota, Okachukwu Christmanus for the first trend, the inculturation, Jim Mandela and Mercy Amba for the second trend, Kamana and Victor Ezigbo in the third trend, reconstruction. These theologians have worked hard and successfully to explore the transformative possibility of the Christological images of healer, liberator, and king that are very vibrant and present at the grassroots level. Building upon and in order to complement what they have done, in chapter 3, I now enter into a critical creative dialogue with John Sobrino's historical Christology. Sobrino's use of the model of Christ's historical existence as incarnate divinity helps him to explore the relation between faith in Jesus Christ and social transformation. He does so along the various lines, 3 of which are relevant for my investigation, and they are: 1, Jesus' relationship with the Father and other people; 2, Jesus' service of the kingdom of God; and 3, Jesus' call to discipleship and hope for the transformation of human condition on the basis of his resurrection.
Then the final chapter fleshes out the normative content and concrete implications of this model and these Christological aspects as they connect to Christian faith and social transformation in Africa. This chapter also reflects on the significance of the insights for the pursuit of a social transformation-oriented Christology, for reinforcing the social mission of the Church, and for the possibility of integrating a Christ-centered vision and ethic in the social sphere. Finally, the chapter concludes by emphasizing the need for Christians who engage in the society or long for social transformation to remain open to how Christ, by the working of the Spirit, continues to transform the social order in ways beyond their imagination. 4. My findings and conclusions in 5 theses. Thesis 1. The vibrant Christological imagination present in the African Christian consciousness can, but does not yet fully provide the resources for Christians' commitment to social transformation. This is because of how the vast majority of Christians, particularly at the grassroots level, understand and respond to the reality of Christ in relation to their challenging social situation. Thesis 2. African theologians have made efforts to distill the socially transformative potential of Christological images in Africa. I tried to build on what they have done by offering a more systematic theological exploration that is of a unique Christological input, emphasizing the incarnation of Christ. Thesis 3. John Sobrino's historical Christology, with its model of Christ's existence as incarnate divinity, offers an essential prism for entering into fuller and more critical dialogue with the grassroots and academic African Christologies that I examined in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. It offers a theological practical structure, or what can be called the historical correlates, which allow one to lay out more systematically the relation between faith in Jesus Christ and the transformation of society, and its implication for the pursuit of transformative Christology. Thesis 4. The Christological and subsequently the practical perspectives shed clearer light on the relation between belief in Jesus Christ and social transformation in terms of 3 effects of this belief. 1. Enhanced relationship with Christ and with others. 2. Engaged or empowered agency of African Christians by the grace of this relationship. And 3. Embodied practices of solidarity, particularly within the domains of the routine life, for example, the family and basic ecclesial-social communities. These perspectives, therefore, present resources for actualizing the socially transformative potential of Christological beliefs. They also help in the pursuit of a socially transformative Christology within the context of Africa. Thesis 5. The Christ event and the event of transforming human society are not isolated events. 5th step, the contribution of my research. First, it clarifies the possibilities and limits of proclaiming and reflecting on Christ's identity and work as healer, liberator, and king, found in the African Christian and theological landscape in the quest for social transformation. And in doing so, the research tried to promote greater dialogue between popular and academic Christologies. Second, the project contributes a new constructive, systematic layout of the theological practical relation between belief in Christ and the Christian commitment to social transformation. Third, the work tries to uncover the potential of vibrant Christological belief and realigns it more with efforts to bring about a transformed society. Fourth, the study contributes a new social transformation-oriented Christology in and for the African context. And the realization of all these aims proceeds from and at the same time reinforces a singular line of argumentation. And that is this: the ecclesial social context of Christianity in Africa demands a Christology with a robust belief in and affirmation of Christ's full and ongoing incarnation, and subsequently a strong connection between Christ, Christians, and social change in the light of this belief. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you very much, Anthony, for your presentation. The promoter is Professor Stefan van Erp and the co-promoter is Laurens Nwanko. Professor van Erp is a professor of fundamental theology of our faculty. He is the coordinator of the research unit Systematic Theology and the Study of Religion. And he presides two centers within the research unit. The first one is the Research Group for Fundamental and Political Theology, and the second one, the Interfaculty Center, together with colleagues from other faculties for Catholic thought. He studied in Tilburg, in Oxford and Nijmegen, and his research interests concerns the fields of philosophical and fundamental theology, in particular the relationship between faith and reason, and between metaphysics and Catholicity. The co-promoter, Laurens Nwanko, you are among us. Welcome.
Yes.
You are a priest of the Catholic Diocese of Auca, working there in the diocese, but also a lecturer at the Department of Religion and Human Relations at Nwamdi Azikiwe University in Auca. His research interests is in African Christianity, Pentecostalism, popular religiosity, inculturation, and liberation theologies in Africa, also about theological methods in Africa. I would invite now Professor van Erp and Professor Nwanko to give their laudatio.
Good afternoon, or evening, or morning, wherever you are, and welcome everyone. Good to see you all. The laudatio is for Anthony, so I'm turning a little bit away from the computer to talk to you, Anthony, dear Anthony. So it was in the, I think it was in the spring of 2015 that we first met during the master seminar in fundamental theology. I had just arrived in Leuven, and this was my very first class. And the theme was faith and reason. And we explored the great minds of the Middle Ages and early modernity through the lens of contemporary thinkers. Now, it wasn't an easy course, and we used all the time we had to work ourselves through the difficult texts, which we discussed at length every week. And the group of students, and some of them are here actually, was impressive, as they worked tirelessly to grasp at least some of the meaning of these texts. Many of that group continued to be doctoral students. Pascal Okpoleke, who is here, Kenneth Ameke, Napoleon Raj, Maurice Ibiko, Aaron Westman, Stefan Taubes, also there. And you were very much part of that large group of students at the time who were actively participating in class. You are probably one of the most articulate students I have ever had, always bringing back a text passage to its most fundamental key argument. Your exam paper was on William Desmond's The Poverty of Philosophy, in which you described the relationship between philosophy and theology in its best form as a salvific one. It was a very good paper, and already then you showed that presenting an argument clearly and structurally was one of your talents. Now, in your paper you refer to one of my texts on the subject, in footnote 4, I've looked it up today, a text that was not part of the course. So, Anthony, you must have gone to the library to check out my work in order to charm me in a footnote. So during that term, I learned that charm was another skill of yours, and it worked. You overwhelmed me with so much gratitude, no matter whether I was affirming or critical of what you said and wrote, that at some point I asked you how on earth you were going to thank me after 4 years of supervising your doctoral thesis, and I advised you to ration your gratitude so you would have some left at the end of our journey together as supervisor and student. You have never followed up on that advice, as you continued to be grateful even during the most difficult moments of your doctoral trajectory. After that class, and during that summer, you decided to write a thesis on Christology and social engagement in the Nigerian context. That was one of the titles in the beginning. And in the beginning, you wanted to study Walter Kasper's Christology for that purpose. And the first intuition that Christology has particular social implications, and that therefore it needs to be nuanced and balanced, that intuition remained with you during your doctoral years, and you have now presented us with a thesis in which you have shown that even small nuances in Christology matter and can have great impact. The other elements of your first research proposal changed. The word engagement was replaced by the term transformation, with rather more active ethical overtones. And it immediately raises the question, who transforms and what is being transformed? The Nigerian context became a much broader context, even though as a researcher you have brought your own Nigerian context into your Christological conversations. And you changed Walter Kasper into John Sobrino. A most important choice, even though Sobrino and Kasper, I think, would agree on more issues and share more insights than some might imagine. Now, in the beginning, you had probably more clue of the direction your research would take than me, since I was not an expert on African Christologies. So I was dependent on your explanation of the choice of literature and your reading of it. I guess that kind of embarrassment belongs to the first steps of post and decolonial theology. But I can honestly say that we have made the most of that experience, of these experiences, and I couldn't have done it without you. During my time as interim coordinator of the Center for Liberation Theologies and beyond, you were the secretary of the center, and we organized at the time a lecture program on African theologies. And the leading question was how to study African theology in a Leuven context, without the familiar Western theologians, Rahner, Ratzinger, Schillebeeckx and the like, providing the foundational frameworks. We also organized panel sessions on the same subject at the new European Academy for Religion in Bologna in 2011. And the issue there was not so much how to do African contextual theology in our time, but rather how to find the right balance in theology between theory and practice in a globalized world in which theories and practices are partly shared and partly overlap in a variety of contexts. So this problem of contemporary theology, a problem that does not go away with a choice between either the local or the global, or between the particular or the universal, or between practice or theory, doesn't go away if you make either of these choices. And this problem is at the heart of your thesis. Christology, in your research, is not a universal given or a single doctrine, but neither is it merely particularized or contextualized. So you decided first to set up a conversation between different Christologies, between grassroots Christologies and academic Christologies, in chapters 1 and 2 of your thesis. And then in chapter 3, you are presenting John Sobrino as a conversation partner for contemporary Christology in Africa. A most daring choice, but with most interesting outcomes. In chapter 4, you then show what you have learned from this intercontinental exchange that spans actually 2 centuries. And you, I think, have found a path between Chalcedon and context in which Christ is being embodied, engaged, and enacted. These are your terms. And in which he, in his diversely imagined forms, is at work in our daily lives and our social institutions and interactions. So with your thesis, you have developed a starting point for further research, and I hope you will find a way to publish it in some form. African theologians are currently developing many fields of interdisciplinary studies, and your reconstruction of grassroots and institutional or academic theologies could be a model of which its continuous renewal of that model could lie at the heart of dialogue and social development. That an engaging faith in Christ is central to this is an important lesson to be learned from your work. So I would like to congratulate and thank you. Congratulations with this end result of a long learning process. What started as an open question, which is a true sign of good academic research, has led to a proposal to hear the call for responsibility in the content of faith. So thank you for having been such an engaging member of our research groups, the reading groups, and the Center for Liberation Theologians. You were truly a person who raised our spirits, someone who kept the group together. You will be missed, and I will remember with gratitude these years in Leuven in which you played such an inspiring role. We do hope, however, that you stay in touch with us here in Leuven. We aim to follow and learn from the developments in African theology, and we continue to look for ways to contribute to it and learn how to educate students from Africa to help us on that path of listening and learning. I really believe that the history of theology is changing in this respect and is becoming more global, more Catholic. And you, Anthony, you were a key player of that theological history here in Leuven. At our meetings and at our student dinners at my place, you were often a father in prayer, and I called you Father Anthony. You always had to laugh. Now I hope you will continue to pray for us in the future. But now I also hope that we will become brothers in theology. So wherever you will go, this year to the Newman Center at McGill University in Montreal, and who knows where next, you will always be welcome here in Leuven. So thank you and God bless.
Lawrence, could you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Could you say something for Anthony?
Okay, and I would ask Anthony to please come forward. That would be
Anthony,
wonderful.
come. He's coming.
Thank you. Tony, my sincere congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Today marks the end of a beginning and also the beginning of another end. You have mapped out for yourself a research path for a social transformative Christology in the African context, and one that is not only fertile and relevant, but also urgent. These are now the issues, I am sure, will last you more than a lifetime. And the research results, hopefully, will not only be in journals and books sitting in the libraries, but will affect minds and hearts and eventually lead to the transformation of our dear African context. I admire you for your courage to embark on this research and the commitment you brought to it. For me, it has been a great pleasure working with you. May I document my appreciation of the 1 year we worked together back home in shouldering the secretarial responsibilities in the chancellery of our diocese. Can you hear me, Tony?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Back then, I was struck by your calm, composed, unassuming, and soft-spoken courage and self-presentation, your ever-ready smiles, your personal relationship with God, which indeed is your source of strength, your love for the church, your singleness of purpose, and the quality of your intellect. These and more speak volumes about the quality of the home you were nurtured in. I've not told you this before, Tony, but each time I read the Gospel of John, where Jesus referred to Nathanael as truly an Israelite in whom there is no deception, I think of you. And if I turn Nathanael's question into, can anything good come out of Nigeria? I say, yes, Tony comes from there.
Oh dear.
On that note, let me congratulate your parents. I've come to know them personally too, because in line with our cultural orientation to family, afunwa ichitande na nna. That is, every child commemorates the parents, makes them present again. We also thank God for blessing you abundantly. Lately, I've been reading and reflecting a lot on the figure of Prophet Muhammad, peace unto him. This was provoked by the Boko Haram insurgents and the line of analysis that speaks of the Islamization agenda in Nigeria and the palpable fear that if care is not taken, the faith of Christianity in the Middle East and Northern Africa could be replicated all over Africa in spite of the teeming number of Christians in the continent. Although you excluded a focus on the social, economic, and cultural challenges facing the continent, these nevertheless weighed heavily on your mind as you struggled to articulate an understanding of Jesus such that those who commit themselves through faith to him would feel impelled by that faith in him to be committed to being salt of the earth and light of the world. As you know, this is not yet the case. It seems like Christianity is underperforming. The prosperity gospel seems to be gaining center stage. A magical mentality is being promoted in the name of Christianity as acquisition of spiritual power and dominion are foregrounded, sometimes to the neglect of ethical commitment flowing from the faith. Addressing these led you to retrieve in Sobrino's thoughts the ideas of enhanced relationship, empowered agency, and embodied practices of solidarity as key emphasis to work out a social transformative Christology. In other words, you want to work out, in other words, you want to point out the emphasis that the church in Africa has to adopt in the presentation of the life and work of Jesus Christ for the effectiveness of the evangelizing mission called for in the post-synodal apostolic exhortation Ecclesia in Africa. In hindsight, Tony, I recognize your frustration as regards the Christological trends in the grassroots. The emphasis on the Christological images, healer, liberator, and king, tend to present Jesus as a problem solver, the one with all the powers to enable people break through and realize their life desires. It is wonderful that instead of being dismissive of these, you took them up and sought to enlarge their meaning. As it were, you wanted to meet people where they are, and from there, lead them on a journey that will eventually take them back to the starting point. Having acquired new pairs of eyes from the exploration, they would adjust to the new and enlarged vision required of them. This is nice and commendable, and to a very large extent, you beat a path for the exploration. But there is, and I'm glad you know it, a lot of work still to be done. The specific aspect I want to point out is the need to dedicate time and resources to the project of popularizing theological ideas and visions. There are many well-written theological works on different aspects of African Christianity. Many of these sit in libraries, often not in Africa, and continue to accumulate dust. The consequence is that the next generation of Africans come up, and because of how bad the situation has become, adopt a hermeneutic of discontinuity with the theological forebears and repeat what may be likened to reinventing the wheel. I am glad you recognize this need. We have discussed extensively on this. I am so glad that you are bringing this part of your work to an end. You'll be freer for the collaboration to actualize the task of popularizing and bringing these theological ideas down to the grassroots. Finally, I want you to start occupying your mind with this observation. The drum has been central in traditional African healing centers. Anthropologists have noted this. John M. Jansen wrote a book, Drums of Affliction, a study of religious processes among the Ndembu of Zambia. And in a seeming repost, Haveji Sindima wrote Drums of Redemption, an introduction to African Christianity. More recently, Nimi Wariboko made a kinetic description of African Pentecostalism. You are Igbo and know how much the Oja moves our people. I'm wondering whether we cannot start to explore seriously dance as the way of moving people out of themselves and reconnecting them to the more of life. I am moved to this point, to point this out, because we wrote about contemplation. We may need to go further and see how to enculturate the age-old and fruitful practice. Once more, Tony, I accept my own congratulations, and I thank God who made it possible for me to be part of your team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Law. Thank you. I'm very grateful for your kind words. And thank you too, Stefan. Now I have the opportunity to speak, to say thank you for your very generous words. Thank you. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Now, I would like to ask the members of the jury, the three correctors, to keep their question short, because we have a problem with the audience here. They could not hear you. So we will repeat the questions. And the first professor, corrector, I would like to invite is Professor Lisa Cahill. She works at Boston College as the Donald Monon professor since a long time in Boston College, since 1989, where she teaches different fields of ethics, New Testament and ethics, Christology and ethics, ethics of sex and gender, bioethics, and also parts of the Catholic social teaching, for instance, ethics of peace. She has been a visiting professor at many places, such as the Kennedy Institute for Ethics at Georgetown University, a couple of times at Yale Divinity, and also in India at Dharmaram College, with whom we also have a collaboration. I would like to invite Professor Cahill to present her questions, please.
Okay. All right, I'll start over. All right, thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you, Anthony. I enjoyed reading this dissertation. I benefited from it very much. I learned a lot. It is an excellent dissertation, and I appreciated the revisions that you did on it as well. And I would just like to say that the thesis that you have provided for us about the enhanced relationship with Christ and other human beings, empowered agency, and enacted practices of solidarity, the way those are important and interdependent, to me that's really the key and the primary thing that I appreciate about this dissertation. So I have two questions, and they reflect the fact that my area of theology is ethics and social ethics and politics. I'm always interested in the practical. And the two questions, the first one has to do with the Eucharist, and the second has to do with really bringing about change in grassroots communities. So on the Eucharist, you use several authors like Rowan Williams and Tanner and Sheldrake to develop the idea that the Eucharist brings a mystical union with Christ. You have a similar treatment of contemplation as at the basis of the Christian life. And my question is whether unity with Christ or the Eucharist or even contemplation can really be authentic or authentically experienced if there isn't already some sort of transformed practices. Like, aren't they interdependent? So is it, first there's a mystical union, then there's transformed practices, then there's a new community? How are they interacting? Or don't they interact? How do you see that problem?
She's asking how the Eucharist and then praxis interact, or is it just that we first of all have this encounter in the Eucharist and then we act, or do we act and then we are led back to the Eucharist? So she's talking about the interaction. Thank you very much, Professor Lisa, for your question. There is always an interaction between the Eucharistic encounter and praxis. But what I try to recognize in my work is to say that it is not just a lead to praxis, but that this praxis is also embodied by this Eucharistic encounter and practice. So it's not a kind of dichotomy, but more of an interaction where even the praxis leads you back to the Eucharistic encounter as much as the Eucharistic encounter enables the praxis. So there is always an interaction.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I think that's a perfect answer. And it leads me to my second question, which is maybe more complicated. It is a question for everybody in every culture, not just Nigeria, but you can answer for Nigeria. And it is, how do you begin a process of transformation in the family and work and so on in grassroots communities where the family maybe is already patriarchal, or there's already work that's exploitative, or a sense of competition? So how do you really begin as a priest, as a pastor, or as a committed Christian to enter these communities and really start the process? What does it, when you go back, what will you do concretely?
Thank you. she's asking what I would do concretely when I get back to Nigeria, for example, in encountering families where there is still the presence of patriarchal experiences and issue of oppression and dominance. So what will I do concretely in my own apostolate towards families that can enable this transformation to start taking place at that level? So I appreciate the word encounter. I think, and that's a word I also use in my dissertation, is about encountering people. And it is within the space of this encounter that we can then engage some of these structures of oppression. I am also very happy to say that my co-promoter, Professor Lawrence, comes from a diocese that privileges pastoral solicitude for families. And I think they're developing something that will be very inspiring too for me when I get back. So in the Diocese of Ekulobia, where Dr. Lawrence comes from, there is this overt emphasis on family as the space to begin, even in the work of evangelization. So I hope to also learn from them the way they try to engage some of these structures at that level. And that's one of the things I would keep in mind too.
Just as a little bit of a follow-up, but not necessarily limited to families, but the grassroots communities and the base ecclesial communities. What kinds of initiatives can you start, or would you envision to start the process of socially transformative Christian experience that you want to see?
Yeah. I think here of two things. First is, okay, what practical things would I begin with in this process of trying to encounter people in the family setting and this process of social transformation? I think here of two things. First is education, but not just in the formal sense of education in terms of classroom training, but also informal education, creating spaces within these communities for informal learnings, and that is very important, which I mentioned also in the 4th chapter of my dissertation, sharing and learning about the wisdom to engage some of these issues that have to do with injustice and oppression. So informal education, and that's my first approach in this process of transformation. There is also something I think about preaching and catechesis. Preaching and catechesis. Often we think that preaching is all about moralization, but in my own work, I think of preaching as also a site for enhancing this relationship amongst people at the grassroots level. So imagining preaching, in fact, I'm thinking of a project already that has to do with how preaching can become a source for engaging some of these social issues at the grassroots. I think of my diocese where we have over 200 parishes, but over 400 priests, and think of what we do with preaching on daily basis and on Sundays, for example. That could be a space for this transformative encounter at the grassroots level. So I think of preaching and informal education. This is where I would start from.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure your efforts will bear fruit.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisa.
Thank you very much, Professor Cahill. The second corrector is Professor Stinton. She is attending this defense from Vancouver. Professor Diane Stinton joins the Regent College faculty in 2010, serving there a double role as Dean of Students and Associate Professor of Mission Studies and World Christianity. She is a specialist in world Christianity, in particular in theological developments in the global south. For many years, she taught in Kenya in 2 institutions. She was involved in a Master of Theology in African Christianity in Nairobi, and also a Master of Theology in World Christianity at the Nairobi Evangelical Graduate School. She is the author, and I just mentioned one book of many works, but one in particular, and that's also the reason why you have been asked to become the corrector of Anthony's work, Jesus of Africa, Voices of Contemporary Christology. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. I want to begin by extending very, very sincere congratulations to you, Anthony. You have written a wonderful work, and I confess from the moment I started reading it, I was truly thrilled to see the topic, to see your level of engagement with it, and I confess, for somebody to be engaging in a subject that is so at my own heart as well, I felt a real kinship with you, and so I look forward to the time that we can meet in person and continue in this path of scholarship and ministry together. So I have some questions for you, but I cannot turn to the questions first without just elaborating very briefly some of the reasons that I commend you so much this morning. And first of all, you know, as mentioned, I have some experience teaching, living in Africa for many years, but now teaching world Christianity in Canada. And I want to say that this thesis demonstrates the very best of the kind of scholarship that we are trying to produce in the study of world Christianity. Set within Europe, engaging with the best of scripture and European tradition over the centuries, and yet in-depth study of African realities in relation to Latin America. And I say this against the backdrop that African theology is often considered as something exotic, peripheral, but you have demonstrated that in this 21st century, given the significance of Christianity in Africa for its global significance, you are demonstrating that Christianity in Africa must become mainstream in the study of any theology. So to me, that is one of your key contributions, and I thank you for that. Thank you for your serious attention to the grassroots theologies. We're going to come back to that. To the dynamism of Christianity and the fact that you are seeking to make the gospel relevant to this new millennial generation of Africans, over half of the population of Africa, the age of 20 or under. This is so critical in this moment. And most of all, I just want to acknowledge what comes through is your own heart for God, your thirst for God, and the way that just your humility and your serious call for this integration of contemplation, communion with God, as well as active social engagement. So I must move on to questions, but I couldn't begin addressing questions without expressing my deep congratulations and appreciation for your work.
Thank you
and
very
it's
much.
because of that I want to squeeze you with some hard questions. I want to squeeze the very best of you and hear my questions as appreciation for what you have done, but also thinking ahead to where your scholarship will move from here. So the first question is this, I have a few questions about sources and methodology. So the first one is that, you know, you argue at length and with deep conviction about the importance of Christian community, and you say we need to study the prayers, the songs, the preaching, and yet in your own study you have largely favored a theoretical approach. So there seems to be some incongruence there, and I'm wondering if you could just elaborate further on your justification for your methodology.
Thank you very much, Diana. She's asking, what can I say about the seeming incongruence between my passion for grassroots Christology and then I'm setting out on something that appeared a bit quite theoretical. So how do I reconcile that? Thank you very much for this question. Just like my co-promoter mentioned at the pre-defense, that I am a man of two worlds. Coming from Nigeria to do theological exploration and research in Leuven. So you can imagine that, first of all, the first point of my limitation in that regard. So now facing systematic theological investigation here. But then, still, I carried the experiences of the grassroots, even in that seemingly theoretical or abstract theological investigation, because I've been part of this community. Like I mentioned in my research question, I've served and lived in this community for almost 11 years in my engagement with this community, and now I'm here in Europe thinking about some of these experiences theologically. But there is also something interesting which would also, not as it were, help to reconcile the seeming disconnect. As I come to the end of this study, I had this increased passion to go back to this community. And that is something beautiful about Louvain research. Louvain points you back to that community that informed the search in the first place. So the incongruence will be made up for, now that I am coming to the end of this study, to go back to this context where this research will now take flesh. And I'm grateful for that experience. So I want to assure you that that disconnect will surely be taken care of now that I've come to the end of this study here.
That is wonderful. And when you continue to write, I want to see you engaging with the songs and the prayers and the liturgies of what is going on in those communities. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you
and
very
in a way,
much.
this question is related. But in your chapter 2, when you are seeking to reconnect the narratives, you speak about drawing upon scripture and early Christian tradition, as well as John Mbiti's 4 pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice that there is some overlap there, but John Mbiti, 2 of his key pillars include African tradition, African culture, as well as the life of the living church.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed that you kind of overlooked, to some degree, one of those key pillars in African tradition or African indigenous knowledge. And so I'm just wondering, as you continue, how do you see, what role does African culture play within your theological reflections?
Thank you very much for this question, and which also points to the limitation in my work that I acknowledged in my own research too, to say that I need more of cultural hermeneutics to help me also open up some of these images that, as it were, may look a bit like classical, but then how do we use our cultural experiences, the African traditional experiences, to open up those images and make them resonate with the people? So there is no doubt that cultural hermeneutics is very important for rethinking some of these images that are also used at the grassroots. So I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind while I continue in the work of making robust these images and providing the resources for social transformation. So the role of cultural hermeneutics cannot be downplayed at all, and I took note of that in my own work as something that also, one of the ways to use this method is by participatory observation in the context. Sometimes if we do not participate in these experiences of the people and to see the effect of these cultural orientations and belongingness, it may be difficult to also address some of the issues or some of these images that are dominant at the grassroots. So I think it is by sharing in the lives of the people that we're able to discern these cultural points that can help in making these images become really resources for Christian social engagement. So that's how I feel I would use cultural hermeneutics, by participation in the context, in my encounter with the people. That's how I feel cultural hermeneutics plays a role.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My next question for you to clarify is, how do you understand the relationship between the local and the global dimensions of Christology? I ask because you are quite critical of many of the African theologians for you think that they are preoccupied with African tradition, African cultural realities, contemporary realities, and yet your fellow Nigerian, Victor Ezigbo, he calls for the development of Christological discourse universally, and you say that that's an overly ambitious goal. So you're saying that the Africans are too, if you like, parochial, and yet when somebody speaks of universal Christological discourse, you say, oh, that's overly ambitious. So I'm wondering, how do you see the relationship between the local and the global within Christology?
How do I see the relation between local and global within Christologies? My response to the question will be first, every Christology is at once local and global. That's how I would appreciate it. Every Christology is at once both local and global. There is often the idea that the global is in the West and then the local is in Africa. But I say, even in Africa, we have our local and global theologies. It's about the interaction of these local Christologies that then we come to appreciate the global Christology. So there is no one spot that embodies the global Christology. Every context has its own local Christologies, and it is in the interaction of these different or so-called local Christologies that then we can think of global Christology. So that's exactly what I was driving at, so that we don't think that the global Christologies are the Christologies developed in the West, the classical Christologies, and then the ones at the grassroots level is just the local. But every Christology is at once local and global, and it is in the interaction of these different Christologies that we come to imagine something like the global Christologies.
Wonderful, thank you. And one last, hopefully brief question. I hope I'm not going over my time, but I want to come to what I think is the very heart of your project and of your contribution in dealing with these three images of Jesus as healer, liberator, and king. When you outline the implications for believers today in chapter 4, in section 3:2, when you speak of Christian as healer, Christian as liberator, and Christian the servant king, I want you to just specify, draw out for the audience precisely how your theological reflections in this section go beyond the discourse that has been offered previously that you have critiqued.
Yeah. In my last chapter, I talk about Christian as healer, Christian as liberator, and Christian as king. And then she's asking, how do I think that these reflections in this last chapter go beyond what has been offered by other African theologians that I engage their work in the second chapter? Am I right?
Exactly.
Good. First of all, what I mentioned in my dissertation that every Christological work has a way of also being in touch with what has gone before. And that is very important in Christological reflection. So you are doing something that is partly new, but at the same time, not entirely new, because you have to stay in touch with what has gone before. And so I would want to appreciate what I did in that chapter as building upon what, for example, people like Jim McEllar, whose work I referred to in that chapter, also have done about the image of Christ and Christian as liberator. That is one thing I would say. Then the aspect of my going beyond is this. I tried to situate and I tried to ground these reflections on the model of Christ as incarnate divinity, as not just something that is imported from outside, but something that we experience and flows out from within the Christian experience, and not to think of this responsibility as an imported extra, but it is part of what the Christians in themselves embody. It only takes some of the things I reflected upon in terms of Eucharist and contemplation to let this aspect of the Christian identity as healer, as liberator, and as king to flourish. That is where my own unique contribution lies. And then also, I try to argue in my discussion of these three identities of Christian as healer, Christian as liberator, and Christian as king, to say that it is not just a movement from faith to praxis, as if just by believing, then you become a healer. But there is always a go in between, and the in between is the relationship with Christ. That's why my work places emphasis on relationship with Christ as that grounding that allows for this empowerment and enactment of Christian identity as healer, as liberator and as king to flow from it. So I try to really bridge the gap, because there is often the tendency to think that by believing in Christ, then you start acting. But how does it happen that this belief enables you to assume this identity? That is exactly what I try to do in my research, which you don't find very clearly in the works of these African theologians, as important and as their contributions were and are.
Excellent, thank you. And so my very final comment, I can't help but think of the African proverb that says, "A bundle of sticks cannot easily be broken." And so as I think about you entering into the guild of African theologians, of global theologians, I just want to acknowledge the strength that you bring, and I wish you all the very best as you take up your role within that bundle of sticks, and as you continue in scholarship and in ministry, both within the urban centers and especially at the grassroots communities. So thank you very, very much for your good scholarship.
Thank you very much, Diana. I appreciate it. What she said? Okay. She was appreciating my contributions in my research. She said that she looks forward to continued scholarly work on my part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Stinton. The last corrector is Professor Jacques Haars, well known to us, to the people of Leuven, and probably elsewhere also. He's a Jesuit professor teaching in our research unit at our faculty, the research unit of systematic theology and the study of religions. He chaired for a long time the Center for Liberation Theologies, and he was involved in an advanced master program in conflict and sustainable peace. He studied many things, among which mathematics, philosophy, and did his PhD at Oxford long time ago. And of course, he is interested in doing research in contextual theology, liberation theology, in a planet-wide context, with a special emphasis on globalization, violence and peace, climate challenges, and all kinds of fundamental aspects of these contextual theologies. I want to give him the floor.
Anthony, I'm very grateful to you for, I would say, at least 3 reasons. The first one is very easy. I can take off this horrible thing and speak to you face to face, which is also what in your thesis you try to do. The second one is that since I've been here at the faculty, I've seen how the influence, the importance of African theologians has grown. And I'm very happy that Stefan, my colleague, and the chief of our department, has promoted this very much. African theology has become really a concern for the faculty. So I think that that is something I want to be very grateful for. And your thesis is an example of that. When I was reading the thesis, I was always left with that question, what can I learn from this? How much is there to be found in this thesis that would be so enriching for our situations here? Now, of course, they've asked me to ask a couple of questions. The couple of questions come more from an admiration for the ambitions of your project, which is a lifetime project. I think researching these kinds of theologies and Christologies in that way is a work for a life. And it's a daring project also, because you try to connect very classical theologies in a certain sense. I feel those at the background of your mind with contexts in which you want to, I wouldn't say apply them, but rediscover them. Rediscover and re-articulate them. I think your relationality, agency, and praxis is a very good way of speaking about contextual theologizing. So, but I'm going to ask a couple of questions concerning that. Maybe as I'm standing here, it's maybe easier if I ask you the questions all at once, and then you can answer in the way in which you want. The first one has to do with the context itself. I've been wondering, I find it it's very important subject, I think, to start from grassroots communities. But the question I had very often when I was reading you, what actually do you mean with grassroots communities? What are you talking about? What is your experience of grassroots communities that is informing the thesis which you write? So who are you thinking of when you think of grassroots communities? And there is an issue of, and that goes towards my second question also, there is an issue of power that enters into that. How does one, as a theologian, listen to a grassroots community's experience of faith and of Christology, if you want, of Christ experience of a grassroots community, without implying to enforce a certain view and understanding of a Christology already in place in the mind of the theologian, and thus structuring what the theologian, he or she, would expect from the grassroots community and thinking. So there's a power issue that is related to that, which for me has been an issue, and it's a methodological issue for the thesis, has been an issue in the thesis. For example, on page 246, you will speak about the integrity of Christological insights in the church. It's the word integrity that I where does the knowledge about the integrity come from? Where do you get it? How do you form it? How do you get it? How do you build it? Or is it something which is already there? So when you speak of incarnation, it has, I think, in what you mean, a double meaning. It's really the incarnation of Christ which enters relationally in our lives, in an encounter with Christ, which is transmitted by the faith community in which I live, and which you probably mean also with grassroots community. The grassroots communities as the communities where we have that experience of encounter that is given to us. That is one aspect. So it's Christ entering. But incarnation has also, and in your scheme this is also something, through the agency informed by this encounter, you move into a commitment, you move into a praxis, which means the incarnation is also we, us becoming like Christ in the world. So there's this double feature of incarnation, and sometimes I have the impression that you emphasize quite a lot the first aspect. So very much the Christ, God, who enters into the world and is transforming the world. But is it not we who are transforming the world? And how does that connect with one another? And those are, I think, power issues, because who defines how Christ enters into the world? What is incarnation meant to be? And how do we understand it? Is this a question of a grassroots discernment, process of discovery? Or is this a question of a grassroots being taught by a long tradition that is represented by a hierarchy or by a group of people who are in the knowledge? That's a question. It's a very European question. I agree with that. I think it's less urgent as such in other contexts. Now, this has also to do with your issue. That's my third question then, with the issue of encounter and of relation. I am very happy you take that as your point of departure. I think that allows one to look at Christology in a very different sense. Not in this classical, dogmatic sense of we have points in which we believe, but in an experiential situation. What are our experiences of Christ? How do we share this at a grassroots level, in a certain sense? how do we bring these together, and what do we learn from these experiences of encounter, which are always very personal and make us to the believing person who we are. And in that sense, I was very happy that you chose as a sparring partner, if you want, for your theological reflection, a man like Jon Sobrino. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit annoying. I'm a Jesuit also, and so I have a lot of sympathy for Jon Sobrino. What in your thesis I found is that you treat Jon Sobrino very much as a formal theologian, but that you didn't touch really the whole aspect of his spirituality of encounter, which he developed out of his Ignatian spirituality, where Christology plays an enormous role. It's inviting us to become as Christ acting in the world. And so that is a Christology that allows someone to reflect as Christ would have been reflecting on, but what is this now? That God enters into the world, works into the world, and how much of that is laid in our hands, in our decisions, in our processes of together working on a specific project, a Christological project. So it's a little bit that question, how does a spirituality of discernment and common discernment inform your heuristical theology? Because it's heuristics. You're also on the, and that's a tension I always feel in your thesis. It's heuristical in the sense that you use words like grassroots, and it's at the same time hermeneutical, nearly in a, I know how it is, I'm going to give you the scheme how you have to interpret it. So how do you connect both of these? That would be my third question. So that discernment issue. And then the fourth question would be one purely of great interest. You've been studying in Leuven for many years. You know my country, you know my context, you know my situation. What would you say to a theologian and a parish priest, because I'm a parish priest also at this stage. So what would you say to a theologian and a parish priest here in Europe out of your experience of building and working on African Christologies? So what can we learn from you? What can we receive from you? And I think that's a kind of, globalization process. We have been working far too much from the north to the south. You're working south-south. Maybe you could work south-north. It may help us here. But I'm very grateful. I mean, you will have seen this from my questions. The questions are not really critical questions. They are questions saying there are such strong, forceful lines in your thesis that I'm really looking forward to read your next articles and books. So I hope they're forthcoming very soon, and that I still will have time to read them when I'm in old age, because that's silently coming forward. Thank you so much, very much.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Yeah. Can they hear you? I don't know.
No, well,
yeah.
better picture. Working, but not well.
Can you hear me, Lawrence?
No.
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, please
Yes.
go ahead.
Diane, you can hear. You can hear Anthony.
Anthony, say
Hi, Dan. You can hear me?
Yes. Okay. Then we can work like this with the two. Yeah. Except that I'm afraid that I will be able to remember. Yes. No.
Thank you very much, Jack, for your comments and interesting questions. First, on the issue of context, who am I thinking of when I talk about grassroots Christology? I'm thinking of Christians in Christian communities, in the churches. I'm thinking of ordinary believers in their day-to-day experience of Christ. incredible. Yeah, there is also interpretation involved in the process of discovery. And I think what is important here is what Sabrina would call the chastity of intelligence, humility to always listen to both sides. Even the theologian trying to interpret what is happening at the grassroots level is also worth listening to, as much as he should pay or she should pay attention to the experiences of the people at the grassroots. So there is always an interaction, and that's what I would say in terms of how do we come to this common discernment of how Christ is present and acting in our midst. So, yeah.
No, I agree and understand that, but that's very nicely put in a beautiful wording. But Sobrino is also the person who says that the church, the hierarchical church, the classical academic church, had lost its capacity to listen to the grassroots. So the power issue very often is also at that level. Do you impose questions? Do you impose frames of mind on the grassroots? Do the grassroots have sufficient space to develop their own experiences and encounters, and Christological encounters, and does the church, the hierarchical church, have sufficient humility to receive those as a gift from the Spirit? So the sensus fidelium, how does that function, and how does that, it's a practical question, and I think you will be confronted with that if you're going to listen to the grassroots. Huh?
Yeah.
And in the case of Sobrino, it has been a violent clash at times. Huh?
Exactly. But what I would also want to add there is, even in theological systematization or interpretation, there is also discernment going on there. It is not as if discernment is just happening amongst the people, and then the theologian is in the library. So even in that effort to interpret these experiences, it is also a discerning process. So theological systematization is also a discerning act.
Okay. Oh no, I agree with that. But the question is, how do you play that game? So that will be, I think, a methodological question that will arise more strongly as more you get involved in these theological issues and debates. Yeah.
For me, also, in trying to play the game, I think I would want to remain an open theologian, encountering people and being open to their own experiences of Christ, and beginning from there to now make sense even of these so-called classical Christological images. So I think openness is the word. Openness to how Christ is working in this community, how Christ is present in this life, and learning alongside one another how they try to experience Christ in their daily life. So openness for me can be called a methodological scheme.
Yeah.
Openness is...
Openness. And then the next step, the Jesuits cannot be proud of what their founder said. Huh? He said, you enter through the door of the other to make him or her leave through your door. And that's where I'm interested in that room where we talk with one another. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this pointers. Then the second question of incarnation, that I seem to emphasize Christ and pay less emphasis on the us. Because I also want to believe that even in our efforts to foster this incarnational experience and event, it is still Christ that enables our own incarnational experience. So it is not as if we cannot become Christ. We only try to live out these incarnational events because of our rootedness and our relationship with Christ. So Christ remains for me very important, even in our attempts to live out this incarnation. So that's why it seems I was a bit placing so much emphasis on Christ than on us. The incarnation
using Sobrino as a formal theologian, trying to build up a system from his seemingly very spiritual Christology. I must agree that Sobrino's Christology, even though it places emphasis on the word Christology, it is also open to some of these systematic construction. That's how I can relate to it and be able to use his insights to engage the grassroots and academics Christology. So the systematic construction of Sobrino's spiritual Christology, I think, was intended by me.
Yeah, I think you could get more from Sobrino. That's the reason why I say have a look at this. It's not a. I mean, he's closer to your endeavors than you may sometimes give the impression. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And then finally, what would I say to a theologian and a pastor?
Yeah.
I would say keep offering Christ to the people. And that's something I learned from my own experience of Christ in my context. One of the things my research tried to highlight, especially when I start to refer to some of the musical albums in my own context, like Osadebe, Osit Osadebe, who talks about Jesu Onyendu, and then Onyeko Owen, who talks about Jesu Nwanem. There is an emphasis of humanity in their own Christological presentation in these musical albums. Jesu Onyendu means leader, and Jesu Nwanem means neighbor, brother or sister. And often I say to people that one thing I learned from these concrete examples of grassroots Christological images is that they help us to rediscover again that the way to encounter divinity is by encountering humanity. In two senses. One, in Christ there is a perfect union between divinity and humanity, and you cannot have access to his divinity save through his humanity. In the same way, we can also have access to divinity and in our encounter with God via our own encounter with human persons. That is what the African Christology foregrounds, this human element, which is very clear even in our definition of Jesus Christ. I think of the Penny Catechism we have that talks of Jesu Christi Chukwuemeka Makani. God the Son is one made human for our sake. So there is always an emphasis on humanity. And it is in this encounter with humanity that we even come to an encounter with God. So what I would say to a pastor and theologian, from my own experience in Leuven, teaching students too, is I believe Christ is present in every human person. And in that encounter with the human person, we come to an encounter and proclamation of Christ. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anthony. And thank you very much for this adventure of reading your thesis. Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Haas. So this is the end of the first session. The Board of Examiners will now adjourn for deliberation. It will take about 10 minutes, and I would like to ask the members of the jury to leave this meeting and to enter the next team's gathering, the next team's meeting. Within 2 minutes, we have to move here from room, but within 2 minutes, we will be there. So. It will take, for the audience, it will take about 10 minutes, I think. Just be a little bit patient, and then we will be back for the final session.
No, it's apparently not working. Right.
It's normal. We have to find another source of power. Is there any source of power there?
Not sure. Yes, 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 yes.
There is. I know, man. Yep.
Huh. Okay, well, good to know. Not use that one anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
examination for the degree of Doctor of Theology. Anthony Atansi has defended the dissertation for the degree of Doctor of Theology, STD, entitled Christ, the Image of Social Transformation Towards a Transformative Christology in the African Context. Having deliberated, the Board of Examiners has come to the following decision. Anthony Atansi has completed the examination successfully and is therefore granted the degree of Doctor of Theology, STD. So, congratulations, Anthony. Congratulations also to the promoter and the co-promoter, Lawrence. Yeah. Despite the practical difficulties we had, we succeeded in getting this organized. I want to say a short word of thanks, and first of all, I want to mention 4 gifts of Anthony. The first one, as his promoter has said, and it's a way of congratulating you for who you are at the end of these events. One of the most articulate students I ever have seen. That's the first point of a very positive appreciation. He was also mentioning your charm. Well, charm works in encountering others. I learned a lot about Levenas in the past, since my promoter was Roger Burggraven. Yeah, this is, well, you are, let us say, incorporating charm. It's an important, when Professor Haas mentions the importance of relational, encountering people, relationships, and so on. This is what you are and who you are. And the third point, as your promoter warned you in the beginning, while learning you, despite his advice to rationalize your gratitude, you are indeed, I've seen so many people here, so many PhD students in the previous 30 years, but you have been, for us, the most grateful person we have ever seen. Thank you for being such a person. I will not speaking about Sobrino. I've met in the past, let us say, he died, Professor Joseph Schrijver, but regularly when he was living here in Leuven, he invited Jon Sobrino. At least once in a year, Jon Sobrino was with us for at least a couple of weeks. A final point, it has been mentioned by our promoter, you are indeed a father in praying. Now, bringing Christ, I was remembering, this is the typical stamp of your promoter, Christianum and Humanum, the way you defended in answering the question to Professor Haas. This did me think of Skelebix, of course. That's Gloria Dei Vivens Homo. That is the intrinsic link between Christology, the significance of Christ, and promoting humanity. That's an important point which brings us together. Now, from now on, you will become a brother in theology, and of course, I sincerely hope, or we sincerely hope, that now, since the onset or spoke about, now you will become part or a member of the guilds of the enlarging guilds of African theologians. Let us say, I sincerely hope that you could bring in your dynamism in the theological debates in Africa. For sure, you will combine locality with globality. You are indeed incorporating both the local and the global. And I hope that you can, let us say, keep that spirit while being a dynamic member of the African Guilds of Theologians. We want to express, let us say, I'm representing the faculty, we want to express our gratitude by giving you the statue of the Virgin Mary, which is the symbol of our university, the well-known symbol since you studied in the seat of wisdom, I think in Oweri. No, you didn't? Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. But nevertheless, they will be jealous at the seat of wisdom if you will show them our sedis, it's there, our sedis sapiensi. I'm not giving it to you, but you can take it. Anthony. Okay. Thanking you for being with us, thanking you for doing so much servants, always with a smile. You have been the secretary of the Center for Liberation Theologies. You did so many things at our faculty. We are, at this moment, very grateful to a grateful person. The grateful person you are, Anthony. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe finally to conclude, you will say a couple of words. I will give you the mic. It's maybe better if you could stay here.
Thank you very much, Dean. I am an Igbo man. You already noticed that when I was responding to Jack's last question, when I started to speak in Igbo to articulate some of the Christological ideas. And there is this Igbo saying amongst my people, no fuaka anaye kengugu. I'll translate, a bundle cannot be fastened by one hand. And one thing was clear from the inception of my project till its end. A doctoral dissertation, like any serious venture in life, is never the outcome of one's own competence, hard work, and creativity alone. It is a collaborative enterprise, a relational endeavor with both the divine and the human. And notably, it is an undertaking with the one who is fully divine and fully human. So my gratitude is first to the image of God and of all humans, Jesus Christ. I came to a deeper experience of Christ as the closest companion and helper in my life, particularly during the course of my theological pilgrimage in Leuven. The pilgrimage that began with the gracious commissioning of my bishop, Monsignor Paulinus Ezokafo. And throughout the years I was on this journey, I received the continuous generous encouragement of Bishop Jonas Benson Okoye, a shepherd so humane and esteemed, and also the princely patronage of Archbishop Valerian Maduko Keke. My promoter, Professor Stefan Van Epp, you made the entire process of my working on this dissertation, more than anything else, an integral setting of a profound intellectual formation and of my personal growth. You know, you always said to me, Anthony, I know you are kind, but excuse me, you are doing an academic work, business. So you helped me to discover again that strong part of me, and that's why I will forever remain grateful for how you made this whole experience, not just to produce this dissertation. I'm very grateful that I was able to do this, but also a space for me to grow and to be able to be a bit critical, even in living life. So thank you very much, Professor Stefan, for your generosity, for your humaneness. You're a very humane and brilliant theologian. You bring so much humanity to your work as a theologian. Thank you very much. And to my co-promoter, Dr. Lawrence Wankwo, I always said to you that you played the extraordinary role that is proper to a theologian, always there as the comforter of my mind and heart. In fact, my coming to Leuven began with Lawrence, who insisted and convinced the bishop, please let Anthony go to Leuven. So it's a journey that began with his own initiative because I wasn't planning to come to Leuven. And then Lauren said, you need to go to Leuven and go there. And I'm very grateful, Father Law, for all you've been comforting my mind and my heart in this whole journey. In a special way, I thank you also, the chair of this session, Professor Johan de Tavernier, for the inspiration of your life and for your ministry too, and your service amongst us as the dean. I remember that my first exam in Leuven was with you in ethics, and you asked me something on Gaudium et Spes. Thank you very, very much, Professor Johan de Tavernier, for chairing this session. And to my correctors, my examiners, Professors Diana Stinton, Jack Haas, and Lisa Cahill, you shed a lot of light on the work by your meticulous reading. I was speaking to my friend some days ago, and I said to him, I remain ever grateful to my correctors for attending to me in this work. It takes a lot of burden and a lot of time and energy to read this work and to offer me all the remarks you gave me, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And your perspectives and challenges helped me to see more clearly. In fact, one of the things you also did for me was to lay on me a burden, and that's a good one, to please continue this work and don't stop. So I feel very grateful to you, my examiners, Professor Jack Haas, Professor Lisa Cahill, and Professor Diana Stinton. Thank you very much, and for your very generous remarks. Thank you. I really appreciate them. I'm grateful to the distinguished professors and members of our research unit, Systematic Theology and the Study of Religions, still headed by my promoter, Professor Stefan, and the research group, Fundamental and Political Theology, still headed by you, and the reading group, Modern Theologians. In all the instances that I had to present my research, their good questions and rich comments were of real value in improving the project. My friendly conversations with a variety of colleagues have been of great importance for me, and there are 5 of them worthy of mention within the context of our journey as doctoral students, and they are John Bosco Kamoga, Christian Ken, Pascal Obaleke, an estimable person and a friend that I've been journeying with in these years. Thank you, Pascal. You're always there, increasing my confidence in this research. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you. And Jos Moons and Aaron Westman. I also appreciate the editorial assistant of Joseph Grabal, who is also now in the United States. He was a colleague here at the faculty. I would like to thank all the other professors at our faculty, especially Professor Dr. Christoph Stroys, under whose promotion I began my academic sojourn in Leuven. I wrote my first 2 theses under Professor Stroys before I now started my PhD under the supervision and promotion of Professor Stefan. So I'm very grateful to Professor Stroys and also to Professor Merrigan and Anne van den Hoek, because these were the 3 that labored in my favor to obtain the IRO scholarship that enabled me to do my research. Professor Merrigan and Professor Anne gave me the recommendation. I also appreciate Professor Matthias Lamberix, the Dean Emeritus, for his friendship and friendliness as Dean and the inspiration of his own life. I organized an event with him, the Omnes Gentes Conference, and I learned a lot working with him. Professor Judith Gruber, with whom I coordinated the activities of the Leuven Center for Liberation Theologies. I thank all the other staff and administrative personnel at the faculty, in particular, Ingrid Walters and Evelyn Denica. Evelyn is here. Thank you very much for your sacrifices. As I wrote to you some days ago, you do your work with so much humanness, and I'm very grateful for that. Even in your pains, you are still here to make sure that this day works. I'm very, very grateful for all your sacrifices, Evelyn. It is already almost a common thing to appreciate my family. I cannot fully express my eternal gratitude to my parents, my dad, Obiora, and my mom, Opuchukwu Rose, to whom I dedicate this dissertation. I said to my dad, he's one of the greatest exemplars of meekness and wisdom, and my longing is to live like my dad. I'm sure he's watching me now because they're following this event live via Facebook and YouTube. So Dad, I'm very grateful. And my mom, I've got this rose flower for my mom because my mom is Rose. Her name is Rose. So I'm presenting this to you. I know she's watching me, and I said to her in my dissertation, she taught me by her own embodied faith and sacrificial love what the nature and the task of theology are. Mom, I'm very grateful. She's my first teacher. My mom sacrifices a lot. I mean a lot. So I'm offering you this rose, and I'm sure I know her. I'll place this rose flower at the feet of Sede Sapientia in the chapel where I live and where I would offer the Mass of Thanksgiving tomorrow. I'm grateful for all you've been to me and to my family, Mom. God bless you. And to my siblings, they're all there watching me too. Thank you very much. My sisters and my brothers, Uju, Obinna, Ejike, and Chiamaka, and their lovely families. I also thank all the families that supported me in these years, because during the course of my research, I had the opportunity of working and serving in the United States, precisely in Chicago, when I was a research fellow at DePaul University, thanks to Professor Stanchu Ilo and William Cavanaugh. And this family has carried me all these while. Linda and Dick Sukub, I'm sure they're watching me too. I'm very grateful. And my heartfelt gratitude to the family of Timothy and Shelby Lopez and their lovely son, Timothy Lopez, and all the other families that have been very gracious to me, and Ludo Mervis, Godwin, Carty, and Caroline. It's all there in my dissertation so that I don't have to take too long. And to all the friends and people I encountered while I served in various communities. In a special way, I would like to appreciate all my friends and folks home and abroad, and very especially the family that I had here in Leuven, Dr. Emmanuel and Auntie Norman. He's here, he's like my grandfather because he comes from the family of my mom. That's my family here in Leuven, and he's been there all these years. Thank you so much, Doc, for all you've been to me these years in my research. And in a special way, my brother, Benjamin Ezulike, the first person that opened the door of Belgium to me, and my formator, because he wrote my report that enabled me to join the Diocese of Oka some years ago in 2002. And here he is, Father Benjamin, for all your support, for all your friendship. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Father Ben. And to my many friends, those joining me virtually, and those here, I appreciate my brother priest, Chidebere, Wilson, Sister Lillian, Brian, the great Dutch translator of my work. Thank you. I appreciate everything you did for me with respect to that, and the many projects we had together in the honors program. You were always very supportive. And to the good staff of our seminary, Florin, the secretary, thank you for being here. He sacrificed a lot to be here. I really appreciate. And to my very close pals who made my days in this Leuven, these past days, very memorable and lively, Pascal Chisomwangwo and Valentine Ubezuono, I really appreciate all your friendship and the support of your brotherliness. I thank you, Dan, who has come to cover this event for more than, he's telling me that over 150 persons were watching this event via YouTube, and he made all the sacrifice to be here to cover this event for those of them. Thank you very much, Dan, for everything. He also brought the light for the staircase outside so that people would not hurt their feet. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate. I thank all the priests and the friends of Ansrep and I don't know, the people I stay with in the seminary where I live at the moment, Father Philip Hackett, the good seminarians and the kind staff who offered me a very comfortable abode there at John the 23rd Seminary. And I wish to thank all of you, my friends, all of you, my teachers, my professors. I'm very grateful for everything that you've been to me in these 6 years. Last but not the least, I want to end this note of gratitude in praise of Louvain, the land I trod in the 6 years of my theological pilgrimage. And I'm very grateful that one of my examiners, Professor Jack Haas, is from Louvain. So I'm ending this note of gratitude in praise of Louvain. I just want to read it the way I put it because it comes from the depth of my heart. I am glad because I would like to say that in the 6 years of my theological pilgrimage here, and as I come to the end of my studies and living in Louvain, I have the joyful realization that one of the most exciting ways to keep believing in God, or rather relating to Him, and not least wrestling with Him, is to study about Him, and in my case, His Son, our Lord Jesus Christ in Louvain. Praise to Louvain. I will miss Louvain, but I will always remember my time and life in her with utmost glee and boundless gratitude. Jack, I'm grateful for your land. It's an experience living here these 6 years because it's not just about the research, but growth in encountering people. As I said in the interview I granted to the university some weeks ago, Louvain connects you with the world. And in that connection, you grow and realize more about yourself. It was a journey for me in Louvain. So thank you very much for this land. And I'm grateful. I regret, but not so much, to announce that there will be no reception at the end of this event. This is in keeping with the present corona measures, but more importantly, I would like to offer it up as a sign of our solidarity with all the victims of the coronavirus, those living but are still struggling, and those who have died. I also offer it in honor of all the healthcare workers and those unsung icons who put their lives on the line and whose great sacrifices carry us on in ways beyond our imagination and even unknown to us. So may I invite us for a moment of silence in solidarity with all these people. Come, Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
So the session is closed. I would like to thank the members of the jury. Congratulate again Anthony, congratulate the promoter and the co-promoter. Stay safe, keep well. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Dankjewel, joh.
Dat is wel, hè?
Ja. Nu, ik denk wel, allee,